Hey everyone, you're listening to Fantasy Uptick. I'm Jeremiah Blue, and today we're going to be doing my favorite episode of the year, which is my top 10 running backs going into the season. And with that, let's jump right in. Okay, so today's ranking is going to be half-point PPR. And the reason I do that is because a lot of people actually play in half-point PPR, but it's in the middle of standard and PPR, so it kind of gives you your best grasp of how our rankings are supposed to go, especially from the running back position, because PPR can drastically change where a person is ranked. Now, I will be talking about PPR and standard while I go through these rankings because I feel like that's going to be important for you guys to know throughout the season. So if you're not in a half-point PPR, don't worry. I'm going to be talking about the difference between standard and PPR as well as I go through these rankings. But the first guy on this list is basically in a tier of his own in all formats, standard, PPR, and half-point PPR, and that's Christian McCaffrey. Last year was historic, and honestly, this year, he's no longer playing with Kyle Allen. He upgrades to Teddy Bridgewater, which is not a huge upgrade, but it is an upgrade nonetheless. They didn't really bring anybody to give him competition for snaps in the backfield. And with Joe Brady coming in as the offensive coordinator, I don't think a lot's going to change there because Joe Brady spent time with Sean Payton in the Saints. And then last year he was in LSU, which we all know CEH came from that system. And so LSU, even in college, was using running backs in the passing game. And of course, New Orleans has been using running backs in the passing game for a really long time. So again, he comes from two systems that essentially do that. And now his best player on the offense is going to be Christian McCaffrey. So I expect a lot of the same. And Teddy Bridgewater is more of a check down kind of player anyway. A lot of high accuracy type seasons and, you know, basically checking it down. He's not a really big armed quarterback who's going to throw the ball deep very much. It's going to be a lot of checking it down. The defense is probably going to be bad. Ron Rivera's out of there now. They're kind of in a rebuild stage, so they're probably going to be throwing a lot, which again plays towards Christian McCaffrey's strength. And last year, like I said, historic season. Now the touchdowns might come down a bit, but I still expect him to get over 2,000 yards combined running and passing. And he's really, he's not a lock for that, but he's really close to being a lock for that. And this is the best I felt about a first pick in the draft in a really long time. So I don't want to spend too much time on Christian McCaffrey because he's basically the first pick across the board. Anybody who's telling you that there should be another player as the first pick is really just trying to make a bold statement or an out there prediction that, you know, gets people to talk, really. But the truth is, Christian McCaffrey should be the first pick. If you got the first pick, draft Christian McCaffrey. Unless you're a Giants fan or a Cowboys fan, you just want your guy, then, you know, fantasy football's fun, do what you want to do. But the smart decision is Christian McCaffrey. The next two is Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott. They're in the same tier for me. I went back and forth with these guys because if you look at it from a distance, right, and you just look at the two rosters, the better offense is definitely the Cowboys. They got the better quarterback, they got the better offensive line, and they have better receivers, right? So basically the defense is going to have to respect the passing game significantly more than they're going to have to respect the passing game in New York. But the reason I got Saquon Barkley over Ezekiel Elliott is basically they've been kind of similar over the last 2 years as far as, you know, they both put up just over 2,000 yards in 2018. And then last year, while Zeke was healthy and put up 17, you know, almost 1,800 yards, and Barkley put up 1,441, it would have, assuming Barkley would have played all 16 games, it would have been, once again, really similar. Now, the big difference there is that I don't think the Cowboys offense has improved very much. They lost Travis Frederick. They did have a change of coaching regime, which I think is going to have more of an efficiency standpoint, and it's going to lead to more wins because I thought Jason Garrett just made a lot of really bad decisions when it came to game management. But the offense itself was the #1 yardage offense in football last year. So again, I don't think there's going to be much of an elevation to Ezekiel Elliott. Now, maybe he gets more touchdowns because the offense becomes more efficient, and yeah, by all means, that could happen. On the other end, Saquon, they get Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, who missed a lot of time all at separate times last year. Saquon Barkley himself missed time, and yet he was still able to keep up pace with Zeke on a healthy game-for-game basis, right? So Saquon, on the other end, I think there's a big improvement there. Plus, they added a left tackle, or they added the best tackle in the draft, who will probably end up playing right tackle, but again, still elevates that offense significantly. I do not know how we put there on Pro Football Focus because I like to put what the offensive line ranks, especially when you're talking about running backs. the offensive line plays a large role there, but somehow they went from 17th last year. They added the best tackle in the draft, and then now they're ranked in the 20th. I don't see how that's possible. I think their offensive line is going to be much improved. Obviously, they added the best offensive line in the draft, and their tackles were their biggest weakness last year. So, again, I think the offense is going to be much improved, and when you compare the two, the fact that Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott were relatively similar on a game-by-game basis over the last 2 years, I definitely have to put Saquon Barkley over Ezekiel Elliott. Again, and I'm a Cowboys fan, as you can see. I'm just being unbiased when I make my predictions, and that's who I would be drafting number 2, right? So the next tier for me was actually the toughest tier for me to rank, and it's Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and Dalvin Cook. And I love all these guys, and we're talking half-point PPR, and most people are going to be like, I can't believe you have Derrick Henry at the top of this list in a half-point PPR league when, you know, Alvin Kamara is probably going to get 40 more points, or Dalvin Cook's going to get 20, 30 more points than Derrick Henry just in the half-point receptions alone, right? But if you ask me, who do I think is going to lead the league in rushing, who's going to lead it in rushing attempts, and who's going to lead it in rushing yards, it would be Derrick Henry to all that, right? And since Tannehill took over last year, honestly, the first 6 weeks with Mariota, Derrick Henry was nothing special. It was after Tannehill took over that he really stepped up, and obviously I'm counting the playoff games, so there's 12 games with Tannehill. That's 12 games, right? So we're assuming he plays 16 games. So I'm taking away 4 games, but even if he just gives me the production he gave the Titans with Tannehill, which was 1,570 yards, 14 touchdowns, he got 18 targets, 17 receptions, so he only disconnected on 1 target for 125 yards. And again, Deion Lewis is out now, so I think that Derrick Henry, there is a chance that Derrick Henry is going to be more involved in the passing game. I don't think that he's going to touch or come anywhere close to Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara, but it's not like he's dropping a bunch of passes. With Tannehill targeted him 18 times, Derrick Henry caught 17 of those. So again, I think he could be a little bit more involved in the passing game, but I think that he's going to lead the league in rushing. I think he'll easily get to the 1,500 yard mark. He got to the 1,500. He almost got to the 1,600 yard mark on 12 games last year. He'd give him 16 games. I could see him approaching that 2,000 yards rushing. That's without receptions at all. Plus, I have the most faith that once the Titans get in the red zone, Derrick Henry's the guy that's going to get the ball, who's going to get it into the end zone. I just feel good about Derrick Henry, honestly. I think he's a cheat code once he gets to the outside. He's got the long, stiff arm. It seems like he always breaks at least 1 tackle. I love Derrick Henry as a running back. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. Here's the other thing with Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook. Both of them on contract years. They don't have contracts. I think this is going to eventually start happening. It happened a little bit last year with A.J. Green, I think. I don't know. But the fact that he was out, the Bengals weren't in it, and maybe he could have played, maybe he couldn't have played. I don't know. If it would have been a situation where they were in a playoffs, would he have come back? He was working on a contract thing. With running backs, it is smart to play, kind of like what Kawhi Leonard, kind of pull a Kawhi Leonard, for example. Like, hey, I'm hurt, so I'm not going to play. And next year, they're healthy in the offseason. It's a business decision, essentially. Like, would Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook in your fantasy playoffs make a business decision based off of the fact that they're still waiting for a contract? Or would they hold out a little bit more, like not play through injury as much? Now, it hasn't happened a lot in the NFL, but it is a little thing that when I'm talking about tiebreakers, these are the things I'm looking at, right? The other thing I'm looking at is I have a tendency to make the playoffs in all my fantasy leagues. So me specifically, I like looking at the playoffs. Now, if you have a hard time and you're in a league that you don't really make the playoffs very often, then don't even worry about this part. But, I mean, over the last couple of years, I can think of one league that I'm in that I didn't make the playoffs 1 year. So typically, I expect to be there, right? And I look at these guys' playoff schedules because, again, we're talking tiebreakers between Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and Dalvin Cook. Derrick Henry, from week 14 to 16, which is what your playoffs should be, is Jacksonville, Detroit, Green Bay. I feel so great about dropping Derrick Henry in my lineup and just letting him go against those teams. You come down to Dalvin Cook, and this is a guy that I do not want this year. And again, he's my 6th on my list, so obviously there's a tier break here. But in week 14, he plays Tampa, who was the #1 rushing defense in the league last year. In the round 2 of your playoffs, he's playing Chicago, which was #9 last year, but in 2018 was #1. So again, a good defense, and I don't think anybody would argue me with it. Chicago is a defense that you don't necessarily want to start your running backs against, right? And then New Orleans, who was #4 last year, but again, 2018 was #2. Again, 3 just stout defenses. So if you're giving me the option to pick between guys that I think are very similar, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and Then I put Dalvin Cook here because he is on an offense that I do trust. The other thing I like about Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara is essentially they're in the same systems, right? There's a lot of continuity there with Derrick Henry, a lot of continuity there with Alvin Kamara. And then Dalvin Cook, while there is not necessarily a lot of changeover, they did change the offensive coordinator, so but it's still a run-heavy, play-action type offense. And they lost Stephon Diggs. I think Dalvin Cook could really step up and take some of that load. That's why I didn't move Dalvin Cook even further, even though I hate his playoff schedule. The next guy on this list is in a tier of his own. His name is Joe Mixon. I'm just super high on Joe Mixon. And the reason for this is because, first of all, I'm a film guy. I watch a lot of film, and I know everybody who's a Joe Mixon guy is a film guy, to be honest with you. It's like Bengals have not used them correctly ever until the last 8 games of last year, when he basically, if you would have stretched that out to a 16-game pace, it would have been 1,988 yards total, right? That was, and then since then, they've added a first-round pick offensive lineman, tackle, right? Which is Jonah Williams, which they added the year before. He was just out all year. So they added a tackle. They added a Hall of Fame receiver in A.J. Green, who I still think is fine in his prime. We'll see how that works out. Obviously, he's been hurt. A lot of people are down on A.J. Green. I'm not. I believe sitting out all last season and having this whole offseason, I think he's going to come back better, as good as he's ever been, essentially. And then we got John Ross, who missed a lot of games, who's able to stretch the field. They still got Tyler Boyd. They added T. Higgins. This is going to be a loaded offense that they're not going to be able to stack the box the way they typically do with the Bengals. And Zach Taylor is a guy that wants to run that 11 personnel like he did in 2018 with the Rams, where they ran 11 personnel 82% of the time. Again, 4 receivers. I just named all 4 of them. What that does is it forces the defense to run a smaller package, which is going to allow for more opportunity and more running room for Joe Mixon. So I'm a big Joe Mixon guy. I think he's going to have possibly a career year this season. It really boils down to Joe Burrow and whether he's an improvement over Andy Dalton and those guys. But remember, Andy Dalton was out for a little bit. So again, even if you look at Joe Mixon's numbers from last year, he became the workhorse towards the end of the year. And a lot of people are going to go back and say, well, Giovanni Bernard was heavily involved early in the year. And he was. But towards the end of the year, it became Joe Mixon's team. And I think it's going to be like that all year this year. Plus, he himself is playing for a contract. So again, a guy that I really like. So first tier is Christian McCaffrey, all alone by himself. Second tier, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott. Third tier, you got Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook. In the fourth tier, by himself, again, Joe Mixon. I don't think he's good enough to be in the Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, just because he hasn't actually done it yet, whereas those guys have already done it. Derrick Henry's already done it. I think Joe Mixon's just as good as those guys, and if it's me, I might lean to take Joe Mixon over a guy like Dalvin Cook, but it's not something I'm going to tell you guys to do because, again, he hasn't done it yet. He hasn't proven that he can do it, and we don't know what Joe Burrow is. It is going to be weird with the offseason situation, which is the reason why I like Derrick Henry so much, is the continuity, why I like Alvin Kamara. I like the fact that they have that continuity in this shortened offseason or like different offseason where they don't get as many as the training camp, mini camp, as much time together with the personnel around them, having to learn a new system. I just feel like it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So teams that kind of have that continuity are going to work out a little bit better. Now, Joe Mixon has the continuity, but again, Joe Burrow is that new quarterback. So I wonder how that's going to play itself out. Now, I believe in Joe Burrow. Again, I believe that this team at the very minimum is going to be a better offense than it was last year. And at the last 8 games of last year, if I can get that out of Joe Mixon for an entire season, he's going to end up being like the number 2 or 3 running back in this draft class. So I really, really like Joe Mixon. I got him in a tier by himself. And then things get kind of crazy, right? Because then we're talking about a rookie, CEH. Now, he happens to be on the best offense in the league. Out, maybe you could argue Ravens as far as efficiency goes, but he's in the passing offense. They're going to score a lot of points. They don't have necessarily an elite defense or anything, so they're going to be in games where they're constantly throwing the ball, and that is basically what CEH does. Now, Damian Williams was a guy that I was a little bit nervous about being involved in the offense, but he has opted out, which means that CEH is backfill all by himself. So unless they add somebody in this offseason or trade for someone, I really like CEH because Andy Reid really likes CEH, and his skill set really works for what the Chiefs like to do. Okay, so again, this is the guy. It's pretty clean kill for me. He's going to be, this is a half-point PPR ranking. If we were talking about standard, I would move CEH possibly out of my top 10, but I would at least move him below Josh Jacobs and Chubb, and I would be thinking about moving him behind Miles Sanders from the Eagles, right? Because again, I don't know how effective he's going to be running up the middle, and they already lost a guard who also opted out with the Kansas City Chiefs, right? But again, the reason I like him over these next two guys, which is Josh Jacobs and Nick Chubb, and I would put all these guys in the same tier, is because of his ability to catch the ball. Now, we're talking about half-point PPR. If we're talking about PPR, again, that's what keeps him elevated, because I know he's going to go out there and he's going to catch the ball. Last year in college, he had 55 receptions. Usually you don't come from college as far as a running back goes and then come to the NFL and have less receptions. And I don't think that's going to happen with him in the Chiefs. So assuming he hits the ground running, understands the offense, and gets all the playing time, I could see him breaking the rookie reception record as, you know, for running backs, right? Not for like receivers, but like for running backs. So kind of like the same way Saquon Barkley, not statistically as good, but the same way Saquon Barkley was involved as a rookie in the passing game, I could see CEH doing that with the Kansas City Chiefs. And obviously, he's going to get an opportunity to score touchdowns just simply based on the Kansas City Chiefs are a really good offense, right? So, love CEH. I think he really opens up. He really plays to what Andy Reid likes to do. At this point, half-point PPR, I don't mind him at all in the game. He's never going to be out of the game script. I think he can run the ball up the middle as well, and the way that the Kansas City Chiefs use them. The one thing that I was nervous about is pass protection, but what the Kansas City Chiefs ask of their running backs is not typically to pass protect. So something that I was nervous about early in, but the more Kansas City Chiefs research I did, I realized that they don't really ask for their running backs to pass protect all that much, which has made me fall in love with CEH. Again, obviously knowing that nobody else is going to be there messing around for touches, right? Next guy on my list is Josh Jacobs, and this might get a couple of eye rolls because Josh Jacobs, again, we're talking half-point PPR, really wasn't that involved in the passing game last year. He only had 20 receptions for 166 yards, very similar to like a Derrick Henry when it comes to the passing game. But coming out of college, Josh Jacobs was a guy that was involved in the passing game. This is a guy that was able to catch the ball out of the backfield. That's why he was ranked so high, because he could do a little bit of everything. So I don't think that this is a forever thing with Josh Jacobs. I think this was a rookie thing. And Mike Mayock has come out and said, hey, we wanted to bring him in slowly, and we wanted him to only worry about running the football. I think this year he's going to be involved in the passing games. And obviously, he came out with a quote that he wants to catch 60 balls or whatever. I'm not necessarily buying into it because a quote came out. I'm buying into it because he was a good pass catcher in college. Honestly, Josh Jacobs is going to be fine this year, assuming they incorporate receptions from the running back position in this offense. Plus, they added a lot of weapons to the Oakland Raiders this year, so I think that offense is really going to be a lot better and more efficient than it was a year ago, right? And again, their defense is just kind of blah, so they're going to end up being in a lot of shootouts, or not necessarily shootouts, but they're going to end up playing from behind quite a bit. And Josh Jacobs, I don't think, loses anything in that department. A big thing to think about is last year, in 13 games, Josh Jacobs had 262 touches. So he's one of those guys that's easily going to get close to that 300 touches per year, assuming he's healthy that whole time. So at least when you know he's in the game, you know he's going to get touches. Those are the kind of guys you want in your roster. Love that. Nick Chubb is a guy that if we were doing a real NFL talent ranking, I would have him way higher on this list. It has to do with, honestly, Kareem Hunt should be on this list too. If we were having a real NFL talent ranking, both of these guys might be in the top 10. I don't know that I would get Kareem Hunt in the top 10, but they could both be in the top 10. That's why Nick Chubb is so low on this list. If we just look at last year, and I did a whole video comparing Nick Chubb to Joe Mixon, but last year, Kareem Hunt, towards the last 6 games of the year, actually outsnapped Nick Chubb in those games because he is involved in the offense. Now, they bring in Kevin Stefanski. I think as much as they ran last year, they're probably going to run even more. The offensive line is vastly improved by getting Jedrick Willis. So I think that this is going to be a very efficient offense. They're going to lean on the run game. I think both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt will be productive. But if you're asking me where I rank Nick Chubb, this is about where I rank him, because I would rather have a guy like Josh Jacobs, who's going to be the workhorse, a guy like CEH, who's on a great offense and going to be the workhorse. Everybody above Nick Chubb on this list, in my opinion, is the workhorse for their roster, or they're on a better offense. And in that scenario I'm talking about, Alvin Kamara is on just an extremely efficient offense. But Nick Chubb is going to be sharing the work with Kareem Hunt This is why I got him at 10. Love Nick Chubb. Would not mind having Nick Chubb on my team because I think the Browns are going to be a much improved offense. They're going to do that. You know, they're going to pound the rock. They're going to use the play action. I think it's going to be very efficient. But I do think that Kareem Hunt's going to be heavily involved. And there's only so much. There's only one ball to go around. And I don't want to draft the guy that's going to be sharing it when I've got 9 guys above him that are going to be the absolute workhorse on their roster. Again, love Nick Chubb as an actual football player. Think he might have a little bit of a down year this year, statistically based on the fact that he's going to be sharing the work with another Pro Bowl caliber running back. That's it for today's show. Hopefully you liked the content. If you did, hit a like and subscribe. If you disagree with any of my picks, let me know in the comments. My feelings don't get hurt. I love discussing these kind of things. Till next time, see ya!